Hi, everybody. My name is Jessie Allen, and I'm a career counselor in career services. And tonight's topic is It's Not You, It's Your Cover Letter. And the reason that I had the idea for this is because tis the season for trying to get a job for a lot of seniors, for underclassmen as well, though, because there's those summer jobs. But now a lot of people are applying to different jobs. And I meet a lot of students who don't really see the value in writing a good cover letter, or they just don't know how to go about it. So today we're going to cover that. Your guys' microphones are all muted, and so if you want to ask a question, you'll have to unmute yourself. Or you can type your questions in the chat box, but I won't be looking at those until the end. So just be aware of that. But you can feel free to interrupt me by unmuting your microphone if you have something that you really want to ask in that moment. Okay. And if you have any trouble hearing me, please, by all means, interrupt me. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share the screen with you guys. Okay. So I have this quote here by Thomas Edison because a lot of times in my office, a student will be shocked that I want them to actually write a cover letter that's a fresh cover letter. They want to recycle the same cover letter over and over again, or they don't see why they need to tailor their cover letter to the job description. And so I often see cover letters as actually a missed opportunity for people. I try to convince them that writing that cover letter and doing a good job at it is going to be a really, really good opportunity for them because it gives you a chance to do something different than what your resume does. So it's a chance to show your personality possibly and show that you're a culture fit for that type of work or that company. It could be a chance to explain something. So perhaps you are transitioning, like you're doing a career change, which most students are because you're getting a degree and you're moving into a new field. It is also a display of good written communication. So if you have a cover letter that's perfect, grammar-wise, spelling-wise, and has a good tone and communication to it, you're setting yourself apart from those other candidates right off the bat. It's also great because it can set the stage for why they should hire you. I hear from a lot of hiring managers that they actually will read the cover letter first because they want to get a sense of the tone of that candidate. And they do judge people a lot based on that cover letter. It's also a great way to show that you are not lazy. So what I mean by that is, they can tell when you are just sending a generic cover letter. Many, many people will make one cover letter, they'll just tweak it a tiny bit, and they'll just send it out to all the different companies. But those recruiters, those hiring managers, they can see right through that. It's very obvious because you're using vague terminology, or maybe you even forgot to change some of the information from a different job that you applied to. So that can make you look really bad and basically like a lazy person, which translates to lazy employee later down the road if they were to hire you. It's also a great chance to personalize the process, and by you knowing your audience and taking the time to tailor it to the person that it should be addressed to, then you're personalizing things and making it look like you do care. So I always tell people, keep in mind there is a person who is reading that cover letter. I talked last week about resumes and how often they end up going through an applicant tracking system at first, and maybe it's not a person reading it right away, but with your cover letter, it's usually going to be a person reading it right away. And they have a lot of other things to read. They've got a lot of other cover letters, a lot of other resumes, possibly the full applications. So they are busy. They've got a lot to go through. So you really want to keep in mind your audience and know who that person is on the other side if you can. So often they will have a contact person listed on the job description, and if you can address your cover letter to the contact person, you're going to score some major brownie points. Don't assume you know their gender. So if it's a gender neutral name, then you want to write their full name rather than Dear Mr. Allen in my case, because my name's Jessie. I've gotten that quite a lot. Dear Mr. Allen. And I'm like, I'm not my dad or my grandpa, right? So knowing your audience is important. Never write to whom it may concern, because that makes it feel like you don't care and you're not personalizing it whatsoever. Also keeping it relevant. So relevant to that audience. Who is that person? What is relevant to that company? What is relevant for that job? So one way to know what's relevant is, of course, the job description. If you can get your hands on a job description, that's going to be really, really helpful. And basically between the resume and the cover letter, you want to be covering as many of these preferred, required qualifications, however they word it, as you can. So some of you have heard this before already, but this is what I always do when students come into my office and they are applying for something specific, is we work on tailoring as much as we possibly can. So I will have, I'll print out their job description for the job that they're trying to get, and then I'll make them go through and highlight everything that they have experience doing or any qualities they possess. Between their two documents, between the resume and the cover letter, they've got to address as many of these things as possible. So some of this stuff is better material for a resume, whereas other bits are better for a cover letter. So as you can probably imagine, the things that need explaining, that you need to talk about a little bit more, those are going to be better for the cover letter because you actually get a chance to write and write full sentences, whereas a resume is very concise and kind of like just the facts. Also soft skills, sometimes soft skills can be better for the cover letter versus the resume. But I will have the student go through and write beside each one of these things that they've highlighted where they've demonstrated them. And then we always want to tie everything that you're talking about having experience with to an experience, whether it be a job that you've had or your education or a volunteer experience. So they should always be tied to something because that's proving that you have those skills. Okay, so another way that you can be relevant for your audience is by making sure that you are researching the company or the organization. Many people try to write a cover letter without having researched the company, and it's nearly impossible. Like, I honestly don't know how people even do it because they're not really speaking to what is important to that company. So the kinds of things you may want to know that can help you write a better cover letter are, do you understand what they do? Like, do you truly understand what that company does? You've got to scour that website. You've got to figure it out and understand it. Many of us find jobs online. We don't really know what the company does, but the job sounds good. Many people don't do that background work and actually look at what the company really does. Because if there's any inkling in that cover letter that you don't get it, you don't get what they do, you don't understand the company, you're probably not going to make it past the first round of screening. Another thing you want to think about is, what is it that you like about that company? This can be very good material for your cover letter, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit here. And then what have they been up to lately? That could be good material also. Looking at maybe their social media accounts. I recommend following companies on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, so you can see what is their company culture like, what kinds of things are they doing. What press releases can also be helpful, so like things that have come out in the newspaper or the Puget Sound Business Journal, things like that. And then lastly, do you have any insider knowledge or personal experience with the company that is positive? That can also be very good ammunition for your cover letter and for your interview if you get one. And that kind of thing could be, maybe you know somebody who works there and they've said really great things about working there, or maybe you went on a field trip there. In career services, we sometimes take students on field trips to learn about the company and different company cultures. Maybe you are actually a customer of theirs. That can also be really good information to be able to talk about in your cover letter. All right, so I'm going to show you guys on our website where you can find the resources for cover letters. So if you're on our website, cwu.edu/career, and you go down here to students/alumni, and then you go to career resources. If you scroll down, you'll see the button for cover letters. And I'm just going to pull up one of our samples so you can see how it's laid out. And then of course you can use this sample as your own, and just type your info over it. Just don't forget to really make it your own, because in this case you don't want to really plagiarize. I've seen students leave the info from our samples in their cover letter on accident, and then it makes their cover letter not make sense at all. So I would pull this one up, general cover letter. That one is just like it sounds, general. That one can work for pretty much anybody. The one down here that says cover letter for educators, that is for mainly teachers, people that are going to be teachers. And then the one that says cover letter with table, that is good for job descriptions where there's a lot of maybe hard skills in the job, or it's kind of a more hard skill oriented job, or kind of more of a techie job, I would say, because what that one does is it takes bullet points from the job description, and rather than you doing a lot of writing in the cover letter, it has you put the bullet points from the job description and then put bullets beside that that show how you meet those requirements. So it's less of a display of your writing. So therefore it works better for jobs where you don't need to prove that you have good written communication skills. If you're applying for a job where they are asking for good written communication in the job description, I would most definitely use the general cover letter, because that is more of a display of your writing. And I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so this is just a Word document, and you can use this kind of as your template if you'd like. And so you can see that it is a business letter. It needs to be formatted as a business letter. I will see people write cover letters sometimes and they don't include any of that top information, like the address, their address, or the employer's address, but you really should do that because it shows that you understand how to do this and you're using a level of formality that is expected when you're applying. So this stuff at the top you don't need, but you do want to put your address, your phone number and email, the date. It says person's name and title, so you want to find out the person that you are supposed to be addressing it to, which could be in the job description listed as the contact person. If it's not listed, I do recommend calling, actually. I recommend calling HR and finding out who you should address that cover letter to. And if you make a good impression, it can actually help them remember who you are and connect a voice to the face. To the cover letter, sorry. So what I tell people to do is just be really polite if you do call and just say, I'm really excited about this position that I see posted, and I'm writing out my cover letter now, and I'd really like to address it to the right contact person for the job. Do you happen to know who that person is? Sometimes they may not know, or they may not be able to tell you. And in that case, what you would do is you would put dear hiring manager or dear hiring committee. Don't put, like I said before, do not put to whom it may concern. And then you want to put the employer name as in the company's address, and then dear, ideally the contact person, if not hiring manager or hiring committee. Then the first paragraph is meant to basically say what position you're applying to and the why. Why do you want to work for that company? Why do you want that position? So this is where I had talked about earlier. I said I would explain what I meant by you should be able to know what you like about the company. This is where that information goes into. So this is actually what we call the hook. So in writing, the hook is the first or second sentence in a paragraph or in an essay or whatever that grabs the reader's attention and makes them want to keep reading. So we all probably remember learning that from our English classes. It's the same thing with the cover letter. You want to be able to grab their attention, especially when they've got 40 of these to read and they're getting tired of reading them. If you can say something that speaks to them, then they're going to want to continue reading. Okay, so going back here to the sample, the middle paragraph or paragraphs, you could have 1 or 2 middle paragraphs. That is as long as I would go, unless you're somebody who has years upon years of experience working in a given field. And then I've seen cover letters go to 2 pages. But for this stage of the game, being someone that's just coming out of college, for the most part, you're just going to see 1 to 2 middle paragraphs. And those 2 middle paragraphs should be all about the qualifications for that job. It should all be highly tailored to that job. You're addressing those things from the job description. And if you don't have a lot of things to write there, then you would just have 1 paragraph. If you have a lot to write, you could have 2. And in that case, I would have 1 paragraph dedicated to education. So how does your degree make you a good fit for the role? Like, what kinds of classes have you taken that relate? Things like that. And then the other paragraph would be your practical experience. So work or volunteer work, projects, things like that. But again, you're talking about what they're looking for in the job description, not necessarily just the things that you want to talk about. I've heard some people say that a cover letter is more about the employer than it is about you, which is strange. But if you are following the job description and you're making sure to stay on point, stay on topic with what they're looking for and addressing those things, then it will be more about them and how you can add value to the job. And then the last paragraph is basically you just asking for an interview and thanking the employer. So you can see we bolded thank the employer because it's that important. I want you to really remember to thank the employer because they spend a lot of time and money hiring. And some, I've heard of this happening, some employers will just go straight down to the bottom and they will see if you thanked them before they'll even read it. So it really is that important. And then you'll see sincerely and then type your name. You can also put your electronic signature there if you can. If not, no big deal, but it's a nice touch. And then enclosures, you can see down at the bottom, that is where you list the other materials that are in your application package. So like if it's, you're obviously going to be turning in a resume. So resume would be there. If you're turning in transcripts or if you are turning in letters of recommendation or references, then those would all be listed as enclosures. So that's just a way for the employer to know whether they've gotten everything from you. It's kind of an old school thing, but we still do it. And it's because we used to turn things in physically. And so like you'd be mailing an envelope and you wanted to make sure that like the employer knew what all was supposed to be in that application package. And if they were missing any information, they could contact you and say, hey, it says one of your enclosures here was letters of recommendation and I don't see those. So that's why they do it. If you scroll down, you'll see that there is also a copy of like what it would sound like if somebody were to write it out. So those are the resources that you have there on our website for cover letters. So let me go back to the PowerPoint here. Okay, so let's just talk about some things that I see that don't necessarily work very well. So here is a typical paragraph from a student's cover letter. This is the kind of thing that I see all the time. So just take a minute to read it and see if you notice anything wrong with it. And I'll go ahead and read it too to make it more accessible for people. So it says, I feel that I would be a great fit for the position. I graduate in June with a bachelor's degree in information technology and administrative management. I've worked in customer service. I'm a team player, hard worker, and you won't regret hiring me. I would welcome the opportunity to gain experience with your company and get my foot in the door. Okay, so does anybody have any opinions about what might not be great about this paragraph? You can feel free to unmute yourself if you have any feedback. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and show you what I see as a career counselor as being wrong with this essentially. So you can see I've highlighted things with different colors. So the first thing is nearly every sentence starts with I, and this is so typical. This is so typical. This is the most typical thing I see where I'm like, oh boy, yeah, we've got to change this up, because it does read really weird when you read a whole cover letter where every sentence starts with I. It does read really weird for other people that aren't you. So that's one thing that you want to be aware of, and I'll show you a fix for that here in a minute. And then another issue that I have with this paragraph, and I've highlighted it in red, is what I call vague claims. So these are things that you're just listing off, but you are not really proving or backing up with any examples. So you need to always have examples. And then lastly, my issue with this paragraph is what I've highlighted in turquoise, which is the part where it says to gain experience and get my foot in the door. So let's talk about these all a little bit more. My PowerPoint is not advancing. Just a second here. Did this last time. Why? Okay, so let me just try unsharing and then sharing again, and maybe that will. Okay. So when I see a cover letter that is I, every sentence starting with I will help them flip their sentences or put a lead-in phrase to break that up. Here you can see I took that same sentence basically of I'll graduate in June with a bachelor's degree, and I flipped the order. And so that's a really simple fix. So I just put in front of it, in June, I will graduate with the degree in, right? So that will help break it up. Another thing is these lead-ins. So see how the second sentence, it says, during my 3 years in a customer service role, comma, I learned that showing empathy and caring about the customer's problem goes a long way in providing excellent customer service. Not only does this help with the breaking up the I's, starting every sentence, but it also ties things to these experiences better. So in the case of the degree, now this person can write, which has given me a strong foundation in blah, 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 blah. And they could list some different theories or classes or skills that they learned during their degree program. Because for a lot of students, they don't have that practical experience yet, but they do have the knowledge. They did learn some things in their degree program, hopefully, that they can talk about. Then with the second one, too, you're more proving that you have that experience in customer service by saying, during my 3 years actually working in a customer service role, I learned these things. But again, this information should be things that are in the job description. So they shouldn't be addressing just any old skill they want. They should be specifically addressing the things that show up in that job description. So then there's the vague claims. That was one of the other problems that I had with that paragraph. They're saying they have these things, but they're not saying how. They're not creating a vision for the employer so the employer can actually imagine them using those skills and actually believe that they have those skills. So here is an example of how you might do that. So maybe this job is asking that you're able to work effectively in teams. So you want to actually be able to prove that you can do that. And so in this person's scenario, they put, although group projects always have their challenges, I've learned that I really enjoy working as a team and often find myself taking a leadership role. Most recently, I worked on a group project too. And then you would say like what you did that's relevant to the job. Or maybe they're asking for someone that has a strong work ethic and a positive attitude, or one of those things. So then this person put, when I worked at Taco Del Mar, I was awarded Employee of the Month for having a strong work ethic and positive attitude. So here they're proving that they have it. I mean, it's not 100% proof, but at least it's more proof than you just saying, I have a strong work ethic and a positive attitude, and I know how to work in teams. Plus, you're kind of telling a little story, which makes it much less boring to read. And examples are key. You always want to have examples. You always want to tie your skills to actual experiences that you've had, whether it be school, work, volunteer work, what have you. All right, so let's just talk a little bit here about red flags for the employers. And this comes from me sitting on a lot of search committees where I help people hire people at Central, or things that I've read in doing my own professional development for my job. So one thing that can be a red flag for employers is if it seems like you are using them. Many times, just like in that last paragraph that we looked at where it was saying, I'm looking forward to gaining experience with your company and getting my foot in the door. Those are big red flags. Those are big no-nos because it makes it sound like you're using them. Like this is just a stepping stone for you. Like you just want this job because you want to gain experience and then you'll move along. So you want to make it clear that you want this job. You want to address this job that you're in. Plus, you don't want to make it sound like you're not, like you don't have any experience now, like you're using them to learn. Okay, it's not an internship. You know, if it was an internship, maybe that would be okay, but still it's iffy territory. Then another red flag would be that maybe you're not in it for the right reasons. So that would be job dependent, industry dependent. One good example that I have is for teachers. I've read a lot of cover letters for people that are applying for teaching jobs lately, and sometimes I'll read that cover letter and I cannot tell for the life of me if this person actually would enjoy working with kids. It seems like such an obvious thing, but like as somebody reading those, you know, as the principal of a school district at, you know, or elementary school, they have to make sure that you have some passion for teaching and you actually enjoy kids. They want to weed those people out that don't have that, right? So you got to make sure that that comes across in your cover letter. May not be a good team member, or they may not like you. This is something that they can actually extract from reading your cover letter sometimes. And those can be things like making yourself seem, you know, maybe selfish or bad-mouthing your employer, or something related to the tone or sounding, you know, cocky or something like that. So they are looking for that likability, whether you'll get along with their team. Another thing is if they don't perceive you as a culture fit. So depending on where you're working, you know, if you're going to be working in a really fast-paced environment, but you mention something that makes it seem like you don't like working in that kind of environment, then you're not going to be seen as a culture fit. Or if a specific company has a very specific or notorious sort of company culture, like someone like Google or Amazon, you want to make sure that you're sounding like a culture fit. Another thing is if you don't seem like you understand the job. So this happens quite a lot. I'll be reading a cover letter for a specific position at Central, and I'll start to get the feeling like, I don't know if they actually understand what we do in this job or this company, this department. So sometimes what's happening is they're recycling cover letters. They use that cover letter for a different job. They think it works for this job, but it's really not speaking to those specific duties and qualifications that this job requires. Then, like I said before, there's the wrong cover letter. So maybe it is that, oops. Oh, just a second, it's doing the weird thing again. I have to stop sharing and I'll try it again. Sorry about that. So sometimes people turn in the wrong cover letters. That happens all the time. You would be amazed at how often this happens, and at high levels too. This can happen at, somebody applying for a dean position at the university and they've turned in the wrong cover letter, and that's just going to get your application materials thrown in the garbage, like right off the bat. It's embarrassing. Sometimes it's just that they've uploaded the wrong cover letter, but they didn't realize. That happens a lot. So, be aware how you're saving your documents. Or they just forgot to change one thing from the last time. Like they did actually change everything. They did tailor it to this new job. Maybe they forgot one little thing that gives it away, that it's the wrong cover letter for that job. So that's something that's going to, like I say, get you disqualified right off the bat, because it's an easy way to just disqualify people and whittle down the pile so we don't have to read so many cover letters. Then there's bad written communication. So I will be helping somebody apply for a job maybe that is for a newspaper or something like that. And they have a degree in English or a degree in communications, but yet they've got errors in their document. They've got just classic errors that makes them look like they actually would not be good for that job. Like if you can't do it now for a job that you supposedly really, really want and you're really excited for, then how are you going to be on the job? You're going to be a liability. We're always going to be having to watch you and babysit you. Okay. And then lastly, you don't sound qualified. And a lot of times people will shoot themselves in the foot and they will talk about the qualifications they don't have for a job. I understand the tendency because you don't want to be overselling yourself, and I get that. But I always tell students, just focus on what you do have. Focus on the things you do have from that job description. The things that you don't have, you don't need to address it. Don't do it. Don't apologize for things that you don't have. I was helping someone the other day with a cover letter, and she wrote, basically, there was a bullet point in the job description, and she addressed it in a way that made it sound like she was bad at it. I'm like, why would you even do that? Like, you just made yourself sound really bad at that thing that they're looking for this position. So either don't address it at all if you know you're not good at it, because you don't want to feel like you're lying, of course, or get some better self-esteem about it and find the silver lining, or find the things that you are good at within that qualification. Okay, so always have somebody else read it. Always, always, always. More than one person, I would say. I think you guys should come to our office and utilize that. Our services are free. Our services are free for alumni as well. So even after you graduate, you can come back and, or email us your cover letter and the link for the job description, and we will look at it for you. So we serve alumni for free as well. But you always want to have people looking at it for the things that I have listed on the screen right now. But there's some additional things too. But let's just talk about the basics. So of course, spelling errors. You would think that Word would pick these things up, but it doesn't always pick them up, because sometimes you're using a word that actually does exist, but it's just not the word you're trying to use. Grammatical errors like sentence fragments and run-ons, those are going to make you look very uneducated. You want to get those fixed. You want to have people make sure that you don't have any of the wrong information in there. Like if you accidentally forgot to take out the address for the old company, or the company name, or even worse, the name of the person from the old contact person from a different job. And then you want somebody to help you make sure that you're addressing the qualifications for the job. Because sometimes it's hard when you've got the resume and the cover letter. Between the two documents, you want to make sure that you're addressing all those things possible. And then lastly, tone. Tone is really important, and it's often overlooked. So this kind of gets to the tone. So after you get all the details, all the nitty-gritty into that cover letter, make sure that all the grammar and spelling and all that stuff's all good, and that it flows, it's coherent. You want somebody to take a step back and look at it from a big picture perspective. So I call this the heart of it all. So the employer needs to know when they read that cover letter that you'll actually enjoy the work. If there's no joy whatsoever in that cover letter, they're not going to want you working there. There's nothing worse than hiring a miserable person who doesn't do a good job, who makes other people miserable, or who ends up quitting because they don't enjoy the work. So what you need to do is you need to have your cover letter be sort of peppered with words that show enjoyment. So it could be just something as simple as saying, when I worked at McDonald's, I really enjoyed the customer service aspect of the job, because I felt like I was helping people solve their issues. And when they would walk away happy, I felt better. It could be just something as simple as that, using words like joy. You can use words like passion, just know that it can sound a little bit cliche at times. So be careful with using passion too much. The second thing that they need to know is, can you do the job? Can you actually do it? Do you have the qualifications, the skills, the education, the abilities, the experience? That is why it helps to apply to jobs that you're actually qualified for. And I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but sometimes there are people that are applying for job after job after job, and they're not getting any of these jobs. Well, they are not qualified whatsoever for that job. Like, you have to have a certain amount of those qualifications. You don't have to have all of them. I would say you've got to have at least 50% of what they're asking for in order to have a decent chance getting the job. Some people say upwards of 60%. But like I said before, just address the things that you do have and don't worry about the things that you don't have. And then, will they like you? So of course they are wanting to know that. They're trying to get an idea from reading your documents if you might be a good fit for their team. They don't want to hire somebody that's going to be annoying or they're going to have trouble with. So this kind of stuff all can come across in the tone, the will they like you part. Like, are you showing gratitude? Are you thanking the employer? Do you seem like you enjoy the work? Like, all of that stuff is going to help them be able to possibly see if they would like you. And then of course, that's going to generate the interest, and then hopefully they'll want to do a phone, Skype, or in-person interview with you. But most of the time, they're seeing the documents first. They're seeing the resume first. They're seeing the cover letter first. So they don't really know. They're just trying to basically get conclusions by reading your documents if you're worth bringing in for an interview. Okay, so I do have one additional resource for you guys, which this is called the Muse. And if you haven't heard of them, they're a great career resource. So they cover topics, everything from networking to resumes, cover letters, changing careers, all kinds of things. They have a book that they just wrote called The New Rules of Work. They're just a really great company, and they give a lot of free information. So if you go to their website, The Muse, you can type in different topics there or look in their menu. But this article in particular, that is themuse.com/advice/cover letter examples, every type job seeker. Why bother? This is all about showing you samples of good cover letters for different industries. So they get creative, which is nice. You can see some actual kind of more creative resumes that have the hooks, or sorry, cover letters that have the hooks in them, the hooks that I was talking about earlier, which is that way to generate the interest to make them want to keep reading. And a lot of it has to do with kind of telling little stories, using the right words and examples. So I would definitely utilize that. And then now we're on to the Q&A. So now you guys can ask me any question that you might have. You can ask me verbally by unmuting your microphone, or you can type it into the chat box there. There we go. So I do have a question. It says, when writing a cover letter for a teaching position, do I address the principal? Yes, if they don't have a contact person listed on the job description, then you could probably address the principal or the superintendent, or you could call HR. That's probably what I would do. I would call HR because I'm the type of person, like, I like to get a chance to actually talk to them and have them remember me. So I would probably call and say, you know, I'm really excited about this job. I want to address my cover letter to the right person. Would it be more appropriate for me to address it to the principal or the superintendent for the school district? Or is there a better person? Maybe it's the director of human resources. You never know. So it's better to find out. Good question, though. Thank you. Next question is, when using examples, should you try to stay away from school-focused examples? That is another good question. I would say that if you had to prioritize it in your mind, I would go with work examples being the most impactful, and then volunteer and school examples. So that's kind of the order that I would go in terms of like which would be the most impactful. But if you don't have any other examples, then you've got to use something. So the school would definitely be appropriate. It's better to have an example than not. And so most employers say that yeah, that's okay, and they like hearing about those things if that's what you have. It says, what if you don't have work-related experience and only pointing to the job and only school-related experience? So yeah, you know, you can talk about the school-related stuff, but I would really encourage you to gain some experience, because it's really just going to hurt you if you have nothing. You gotta have, I mean, it's not just a degree that's going to sell you. And there's lots of people that have degrees and no experience, or they don't have very good soft skills, and they don't end up being very successful, even though they've got this maybe really great sounding degree. And then there's other people in the world who, you know, they don't have a degree, but they're very successful. And it's because they've gained experience and they've worked on their skills. So I would recommend, even if it's just volunteer work, getting some volunteer work in your field. So if your field is in medicine, you know, healthcare, gain some volunteer experience. Or if it's working with kids, or if it's working in IT, try to get, you know, either volunteer work or an internship. And yes, you can use projects. So it says, would personal side projects count? Yes, you can put those on there for sure. For certain fields like engineering or computer science or IT, a lot of times people do have a section called projects. Or on their resume, they'll have a section called related experience, and it'll have projects in there. So you can certainly talk about those personal projects, and especially if they are if it's going to help you talk about specific skills that they're asking for in that job description. So another good question. By the way, we do have our drop-in times on our website. So if you go to cwu.edu/career, on the right-hand side, it'll say resume and cover letter drop-in times. You just click in there, you can see the full schedule of when you could come see somebody without having an appointment. So that might be helpful for you guys, or you can feel free to make an appointment with me or one of the other career counselors and have us go over your documents with you before you turn them in. All right, so we have, looks like 2 minutes left. Any other questions before we go? No? Okay. Well, feel free to reach out to Career Services if you think of something later that you need help with, or come see us during our drop-in times. Thank you so much for being here tonight with me, and this will be recorded and put up on YouTube soon if you needed to go back and look at anything or share it with a friend. All right, you guys have a great evening. Thank you so much.